That was a time when certain entities were too big to fail, because if they had failed, everything would have collapsed. Our whole financial system would have gone down the drain. And where would that leave us?
Looking back 10 years later, what is one story from 10 years ago that still sticks with you?
I remember this woman. She was retired. Her house was underwater. I mean, literally and figuratively, because when she took me through, she was showing where it had been flooded. I remember after I interviewed her about her situation with her mortgage, she was telling me off camera how upset she was because she wanted to borrow some money from her daughter. She wanted her daughter to co-sign on a loan for her. And her son-in-law said no. And she was so upset. And of course, I'm not going to take sides, I'm just listening. But I'm thinking to myself, that's a smart son-in-law. Because personal experience, co-signing for somebody usually doesn't work out very well. I've heard many stories. But there was a lot of that going on during the mortgage crisis. And while I felt for that woman, in the end, more than likely, she would not have been able to pay that back. You had a lot of situations where you might have had a married couple. And when they bought a home, they did it based on two incomes. One of them loses their job in the Great Recession. There was a lot of that. And trying to figure out, what do we do now? A lot of people with those ARMs, ARMs, adjustable rate mortgages, which I personally is something I would never do, because to me that's such a gamble. A lot of people were just caught off guard because there was that, what do they call it, irrational exuberance involving the housing market, and everybody just thought prices were going to go up, 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 until they didn't, until they went the other way. So,
a little balloon burst.
Yeah.
In watching some of the episodes and working with you on this project, we had a phone bank, we had a call center here where we fielded questions from people in the St. Louis area. Were there a lot of calls? Did we get a lot of people with similar type stories like that?
Oh, yes.
Tell me a little about that.
A lot of 211 calls. That was handled. The 211 is a separate agency that worked with us, part of the United Way. And they got thousands of calls. And they were able to connect all those people with organizations that could help. But it would really have been nice to be able to do a statistical analysis of how many people actually managed to work through their problems and stay in their homes. That's an unanswered question. I'd really like to know the answer to that.
How did all the other staff here at the 9 Network handle that whole situation of taking those phone calls and dealing with all those people that were going through such horrible situations and issues with their homes? Do you know?
Well, a lot of them, they would hear the stories and then they would funnel those individuals through the 211 and then to the agency, because, you know, we personally can't do anything. But I think for a lot of people, they've heard these stories before. A lot of our employees have heard those stories from friends and relatives, so they were all pretty familiar. But another way in which the entire staff became involved, we did videos of each department, people in each department talking about their role in helping address this situation in our community. We put together a video that was then broadcast to all the other public television stations that were involved in the mortgage crisis project. So we kind of provided them with a toolkit, because we kind of did it first.
Very cool.
And it was really cool, and it involved the whole station. And I think, and it gave us, not that we didn't have purpose before, but it sort of opened the door to a much larger mission, that of community engagement. And it has, I think it's changed the focus for everybody here.
So did a lot of other stations really look at the 9 Network as a leader then around the mortgage crisis because of that work?
Hate to brag, but yes. They really did. And they were so grateful, because it was like, where do you start? And different stations were in different markets that were affected differently by the crisis. So they were able to actually look at some of the things we did, pick out those approaches that worked in that market.
Well, let's keep turning this back on you a little bit.
Oh, no.
How were you personally affected by the mortgage crisis? I mean, we talk about, again, you covering everybody else, but it's been 10 years. Was there anything that you suffered through that you want to talk to us about, that you personally saw that you were impacted by?
What I was probably impacted by the most was actually during the aftermath. And I was renting at the time of everything fell in 2008. And I was thinking, oh boy, I'm so glad I'm renting.
Yes.
And I didn't have to worry about a mortgage. But I finally did find a condominium in 2011 that I did eventually buy. But the first mortgage I applied for, I was turned down. My credit is sterling. I take pride in paying my bills on time, not having too many credit cards, all of that. But people were so jittery that an individual who ordinarily would have been cleared like that, I was turned down. Second time around, someone referred me to a company, very well respected, had been in business locally for a long time. I went in, no problem. But yeah, that was probably the biggest effect because I was insulted. It was like, first everybody's, oh, let's just give out money and you don't need to have a job and to the opposite extreme.
And we know that there are still people out there that may still be struggling with housing payments and struggling with their own personal crises. What advice do you have for them?
My advice would be things do happen in cycles, There are bad times, yes, but they always get better. You can't do enough research when it comes to buying a house, managing your finances, Just take a look at all your credit cards. You really need all those? I got rid of, because I had a lot of credit cards I wasn't even using. So I canceled a lot of them. One piece of advice I would give to people, if you're going to start paring back on things like that, I made the mistake of saying, okay, I'm going to cancel these 6 cards because I don't need them. And I did it all at once, and it made my credit rating go down. It's like, I'm trying to do the responsible thing. Why did I just lose 20 points on my credit score? It eventually went back up. Yeah. But the things that you learn.
Is there anything that makes you angry about what you've seen over the last 10 years? There's so many people that have been impacted by this. Have you ever just gotten mad about it?
I have gotten mad about it because the individuals who are giving out those horrible subprime loans, they knew what they were doing. The loans were not illegal. The bank will give you money and then turn around, immediately sell your loan in a bundle to someone else. The bank now, instead of getting money in the form of interest from you, they get it in the form of fees. Then they sell your loan. It can be sold a whole bunch of times. I don't think anybody conceived that our problem in the United States would filter its way out to the international market. But yes, those mortgages were sold because classically that was a really safe investment. And in spite of all that, in spite of all the damage that those loans caused, no one's had to account for it. No one was put on trial. Nobody went to jail. The mortgage bankers took their money and ran. That's not right. It may have been legal, but it's not right.
So Ruth, what do you think would have happened had the Nine Network not covered the mortgage crisis 10 years ago the way they covered it?
If the Nine Network, all of us at the Nine Network, hadn't chipped in to do our part, I feel the level of desperation would have been so much higher in the St. Louis area. People would have just felt that they had nowhere to turn. We provided that. And that's something I'm really proud of.